specifically target that demographic as an outreach. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could stay on the line, I do apologize. I didn't catch your name at the beginning.
I'm sorry?
I did not catch your name at the beginning. You started speaking and I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, I'm Davey Rodriguez.
David, okay, thank you.
What? I'm sorry. I have suffered a grand amount of hearing loss recently, and this electronic communication complicates that.
No problem. We could hear you, and I feel the pain with the hard hearing. So thank you for your comments, David.
You bet.
Catherine, any other public comments?
Yes, we have a public comment from Aida Yurzar, and I'll be sending her a request to unmute.
Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you again. One comment that I wanted to make is that I love this assessment and the outreach that you guys are going to do to the community. However, one thing that I see that you guys are missing is that you guys are not assessing or investigating the sales agents or the sales persons that these contractors have or hire. Now, these sales agents also need to have a license with the California State Licensing Board, but a lot of them are not having this license, and they are there in the community promoting business for contractors, and that's also where the fraud is coming. A lot of these sales agents are pretending to be or to have a license from the CSLB, but they don't. Sometimes they do get it, but they let it expire. And that's how they start convincing people in the community to hire them and eventually contact them, connect them with a contractor. So we can see that the snowball of the fraud continues with them. So like I said, I love the fact that you're doing outreach for the contractors and everybody else, but you guys are forgetting the sales agents as well, the salespersons. They also need to have a license with you guys, but a lot of them are not having them, and they're pretending to be, licensed when they're not. So I just wanted to, bring that up so you guys can probably, do some investigation or add it into the assessment as well. Thank you.
Thank you again for your comments. All right. Any other public comments?
No other public comment at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Captain. This concludes the Enforcement Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn the Enforcement Committee?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we're going to move into legislation next.
Okay, we're adjourned.
I think Miguel motion.
Miguel motion doesn't need a second or.
You don't need this, doesn't need a second.
Okay.
Miguel made the motion.
There was a second.
Second.
No, we're good. All good.
Okay.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
And Joel's at Norwalk.
I am.
So Joel, are you ready to go?
I certainly am.
Excellent.
I just promoted Diana to the panel, and I believe we have all the other board members, all the other committee members on 4+1.
We're ready. We'll get started. The Legislative Committee meeting dated April 11th. Call to order, roll call, establishment of quorum, and chair introduction. Good morning. The time is like 11? Thank you. Call to order the April 11th, 2025 meeting of the Contractor State License Board Legislative Committee and 12 Garden Legislative Committee Chair. Please note that only board members who are members of the Legislative Committee may participate in this committee meeting. Other board members who are in attendance may observe, but cannot ask questions or participate in the discussion. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss bills pending before the legislature that are of interest to the CSLB. Because this teleconference committee meeting is remote, committee members cannot make recommendations or motions. However, committee members can gather, discuss, and receive comments from the public. Committee members, we will be using cameras during this meeting. Law requires committee members participating in this meeting to have their cameras on. Please have your camera on for the duration of the meeting. When you would like to comment during the meeting, please select the raise your hand icon in the WebEx application. Our moderator will call on committee members to speak. When called upon, please unmute yourself, and when finished, return to mute. Robin, please call roll and confirm we have a quorum.
Joel Barton,
Here.
Rodney Cobos,
Here.
Miguel Galarza,
Here.
Amanda Gallo has an excused absence, Diana Love,
Here.
Joseph Preciado,
Here.
Thomas Ruiz.
Present.
Quorum.
Thank you, Robin. CSLB staff participating in today's meeting include Registrar David Vogt. I think Chief Legislative Director Rebecca May is here.
No, Rebecca was not able to make it today, so Mike Chemensky and I will be covering for her.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So we do have Special Projects Manager Mike Chemensky and Executive Office Staff Robin Williams. We're also fortunate to have with us John Kin, DCA Board Counsel, and Chief of Public Affairs Catherine White is moderating this meeting. We'll now move on to Agenda B. Public comments for items not on the agenda and future agenda item requests. Agenda item B is an opportunity for members of the public to provide comment regarding items not on today's agenda. State law prohibits committee members from discussing any items not on the agenda. If you want the committee to discuss a topic not on the agenda, you can ask the committee to consider placing that issue on the agenda of a future meeting. If your comment is related to a specific agenda item, please wait until that item comes up. We will ask for public comment on each agenda item. Lastly, to allow this committee enough time to conduct a full schedule of business, public comments are limited to 3 minutes apiece. Chief of Public Affairs Catherine White is our host and moderator today. She will assist us by monitoring public comment through WebEx. Members of the public who would like to comment at any time during the meeting, please select raise your hand icon on the WebEx application or leave a message with the chat feature. First, I will ask if any committee members have items they would like to place on a future agenda item. Seeing no additional comments by committee members, I will now turn to the general public comment. For this agenda item and future agenda items, I will start with members of the public in Sacramento and then move to members of the public attending via WebEx. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding items not on today's agenda or to offer an agenda item for a future meeting? Hearing none, Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to address the committee regarding items not on today's agenda or to offer an agenda item for a future meeting?
Yes, Andrea Montano has her hand raised, so I will be sending her a request to unmute.
Thank you again, Catherine, and thank you for having me here today. I do want to start with, for the items that I'm about to speak to, I would like to formally request to have this added as a future agenda item. I will send in a written request for that along with some of the other things that I had mentioned, but it was more targeted for this meeting, and so I hope that we can create a placeholder for that. For this particular, we were looking at the framework components relating to construction fraud enforcement enhancements, emergency mass fraud response protocols, and Construction Verification and Certification Act where the construction industry protection framework could identify critical legislative needs to address emergency response for mass fraud and severe hardship cases. We urge the committee to consider sponsoring an enforcement act that could establish dedicated funds for specialized construction fraud prosecution units, create enhanced sentencing guidelines for multi-victims construction fraud, implement victims restitution priority for construction fraud cases, and establish cross-jurisdictional authority for regional fraud schemes. In addition, we'd like to recommend codifying an emergency mass fraud response protocol that could initially be implemented through administrative action, and this could establish a permanent framework for rapid response to mass fraud events and provide sustainable funding for a catastrophic fraud recovery fund. In prevention, our proposed Verification and Certification Act could also establish standardized verification protocols for architectural certification of project milestones, preventing payment-phased fraud that is the root cause of many catastrophic events. That is all I have for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, did you see anyone else?
There's no other public comment at this time.
Thank you. So we'll move
Oh,
on.
wait, never mind.
Yeah.
Someone just raised their hand. Sorry about that. Roy Porter just raised his hand, so I'll be sending him a request to unmute.
A question, because I see in the legislation that there's like 9 bills before you. Do you talk about each bill individually, or is this just in general?
Yeah, we'll talk about them in general. Because this is not an in-person meeting, we'll not be voting on any of them. That'll be I believe we have a meeting in June in person, but this is just to introduce them and to get input from the public or any other committee meeting members on how to respond. We will be reading it, and staff's recommendation to support if amended, and that will be mentioned with each reading.
Okay, so I wanted to make comment on 2 of the bills that are pending. Should I do that now, or?
No, if you would do it once we read the bill, we'll ask for
okay, great.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Catherine, anyone else?
Seeing none at this time.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item C. This is review and discussion of the 2025-2026 pending legislation. We have 9 bills on today's agenda for discussion. Because this committee meeting does not have an in-person quorum, we're not voting on any positions. While we're not voting on positions today, staff provided and recommended positions for use in our discussions. I will provide a brief summary of each bill status before opening it up for discussion. We'll start with item 1, which is AB 485 Ortega. An analysis of this bill can be found in the supplemental meeting materials. AB 485 is currently on suspense in the Appropriations Committee. This bill requires CSLB to deny a license or license renewal if the Labor Commissioner determines a licensee or applicant is in violation of an unsatisfied judgment related to the non-payment of wages. For further comment on this bill, I'll turn it over to either David or Mike.
Thank you, Chair Barton. I'll take this one. Just some real quick background. CSLB has a statute that relates to this. It's Business Professions Code 7145.5. And we look at what we accomplished with that last year. It resulted in the recovery of almost $39 million in penalties or outstanding liability to other state agencies. So this bill doesn't directly impact the CSLB because we already have the authority, but we put it in the packet to get your opinion on whether or not this is something that you think the board may want to support. Something else to think about as we cover these 9 bills. Do you think these bills are of such importance that they should be included at the June board meeting where we can take a vote and you can take an official position? The board does carry some weight in the legislature when they take a position to support or oppose. But that's the reason for this. So it's just for a discussion item. Do you think this is important that the board would support this? It would give the same authority we have here to say the architects or engineering board, or just leave it up to them. So that's really it for discussion.
Thank you, Dave. And staff has recommended a neutral position on this item. And I'll save my comments unless feel appropriate. I think it's something we should look into. Anyone else on the committee, would they like to make comments or discussion on this item?
Chair?
Yes.
So, point of fact is when we speak about wages and payment of non-wages, does Ortega define what wages means? Are wages minimum wages? Are wages prevailing wages? Does the statute define what wages mean?
Yeah, that's Miguel. Thank you for that in a way. And that's I'm always speaking with Legislative Director May, and I had the same question whether it involves benefits also. And this is basically a judgment which would include any wages according to the way we talked about it. And again, I do stress and understand your question about whether it's daily or it's cumulative, and I think that's something we should look into.
Yeah, if I could just add that the way we look at this, it's a civil wage and penalty assessment that's issued by the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement. And so, I kind of gave you a general number for other state agencies, but for that, it was $4.6 million last year. So it could be anything. It could be, any employee that files a claim saying, I didn't receive my wages, or it could be prevailing wage. For that scope, though, it's not going to include, like, not withholding payroll taxes, as an example. It's going to be a civil wage and penalty assessment.
Thank you, registered folk. That helps me understand. So the trigger is actually a DIR, a judgment.
Yeah, like I said, CSLB, we don't do an independent investigation, so we wait for the partnering state agency to complete their investigation. And my understanding of this bill is that would be the same requirement. Again, it wouldn't change any of our authority here, but it might be helpful if, as an example, the architects board or the engineering board could suspend their license if there was an outstanding civil wage and penalty assessment. But we took a neutral, recommended a neutral just because we haven't had a chance to talk to other state agencies as to their opinion of this. But we wanted to see if we should do that, and if you think we should include it at the joint June board meeting.
Right. Thank you, Registrar Folk. Any other committee members would like to comment or make suggestions?
Chair, this is Thomas Ruiz.
Yes, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. I do like this one. I mean, wage stuff is rampant, especially when you're in the industry and tracking some of these folks. So I would like to see it on the June meeting for discussion. And I do like that it's a judgment only when it's a judgment, not just an allegation. So I would like to see it in June.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. Any other committee members?
No, that was the same thing with Thomas.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
same thing.
Ditto with Rodney. Any other committee members like to comment or discuss?
Sure, this is Joseph Preciado. I appreciate Registrar Folks' recommendation in terms of doing some additional research to find out what other states may be doing and what actions could potentially be taken, and take that into advisement prior to taking a position on this particular bill.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I agree also. And Registrar Folk, this is something we could make a recommendation at our June meeting, correct?
You could definitely you can take a vote on it at the June board meeting if we include it on the agenda.
Right.
You can decide at that point if you would like to support it or oppose it.
Okay.
Support.
Thank you, Dave. I think the consensus is to look further into it and then have it on an item for our June meeting to either stay neutral, support, or not support. So if you would do that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Any other committee members? All right, I'll now turn to public comment. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding AB 485?
Yes, Richard Markuson.
Yeah, good morning, Richard Markuson to the Western Electrical Contractors Association. We would certainly agree that this is a important measure for the board to consider at your next meeting. I would point out that it is on the suspense file because of the costs that are associated with it. But I think it would be helpful as the legislature considers advancing this to hear the success stories from the CSLB as to how you have been using your existing authority to go after wage theft, which is something that plagues the industry substantially. We are supporting the measure and would encourage the board to consider it in June, assuming that it gets off of suspense.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in Sacramento? Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to comment on AB 485?
Yes, Andrea Montano has her hand raised, so I'll be sending her a request to unmute.
Okay.
Thank you again, and thank you again, committee, for hearing my request. I would like to also support including it on the June meeting agenda, and also support AB 485 and where it's at now, even though there are some fiscal challenges there. I just kind of want to broaden the perspective for some potential future enhancements and give kind of a humanized, experienced approach as to why recommending this and to incorporate key elements for a framework that could also expand for emergency response, because it is a rampant issue that's happening for employees alongside contractor subs and customers when fraud occurs, and create an expedited potential license suspension process when wage theft affects multiple projects or employees indicated by potential mass fraud. Establish a coordinated enforcement protocol between the Labor Commissioner, CSLB, the district attorneys, and also with the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division, and look at the provisions for a potential business continuity emergency program, like I had mentioned before, where potential emergency funds for employees can be in consideration, as they are also victims in a lot of these frauds when serial wage theft occurs. And when looking at this enhanced approach, and again, we're going to take this also to legislators, looking at transforming AB 45 from a reactive enforcement tool to a proactive prevention system that could identify potential mass fraud before it escalates to a catastrophic level. And so when, thinking about the situation in the case of this particular contract, we went to the California Labor Commissioner, had filed those claims, as well as the Department of Labor and Wage and Hour Division. And unfortunately, they couldn't take a position because the company had already gone insolvent. And so they did defer us to the California Labor Commissioner. We know that those wage theft claims are approximately 2 years out plus to even see a judgment. And then when you throw a bankruptcy complexity layer on top of that, it just, makes that systemic process even worse. And so taking an employee who had worked and already, and just didn't receive a paycheck, and the company folds, they kind of get left holding the bag in numerous ways. Not only do they not have a job, but they don't have a way to recover for the work they've already performed alongside subcontractors. And so having kind of a transparent handshake with a lot of these other agencies could greatly improve, I think, mitigating those risks, as well as helping with recovery for several employees that are still working through these crises. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Are there any other members on WebEx?
Seeing none at this time.
Thank you, Catherine. So we'll close item 1. Let's move on to number 2, AB 667 Solace. An analysis of this bill can be found in the supplemental meeting materials. AB 667 passed out of the Assembly Business and Professions Committee and is in the Committee on Health. This bill requires programs under the Department of Consumer Affairs, including CSLB, to allow applicants to use an interpreter to interpret the licensing examination. For further comment on this bill, I'll turn it over to Mike Jametsky.
Yes, thank you, Chair Barton. AB 667 really actually puts into statute largely what CSLB already does with regard to its translations and its exams. As you mentioned, Chair, it does require boards and bureaus to allow applicants to use a translator to have the exam read in, which CSLB already does. This bill will define what an interpreter is and define when they can and cannot be used, which we already do. Really, the only difference between our current processes and what this bill would require is provide that we collect some data and report it, which is doable. So that's really all to add on this. I don't think it's a big lift. We just wanted the board to be aware of it. So I don't have anything else to add, unless anybody online or with the committee would like to comment.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And staff has recommended a neutral position on this bill. I'd like to now open the agenda item up for discussions by committee members. Are there any comments or questions from committee members regarding AB 667? All right, seeing no additional comments by the committee members, I will now turn to public comment. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding AB 667?
No.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to comment on AB 677?
None at this time.
Looks like it's 667. I apologize. All right, thank you. So with that, let's close item 2. We'll move on to 3, AB 742, El Hawari. An analysis of this bill can be found in the supplemental materials. AB 742 passed out of Assembly Business and Professions Committee and is in the Committee on Judiciary. This bill requires programs under the Department of Consumer Affairs, including CSLB, to prioritize applicants seeking licensure who are descendants of American slaves. Status on the descendant of an American slave would be confirmed by a newly established Bureau for Descendants of American Slavery. The passage of this bill is contingent on the formation of the Bureau, which is included in another bill. For further comment on this bill, I'll turn it over to Registrar Vogt. David?
Thank you, Chair Barton. Our goal is to provide timely processing of applications for all applicants. We do occasionally expedite an applicant, and that one example would be an applicant that's going to employ numerous workers so that you can ask for an expedited process. What we're really talking about here is shaving 2 to 3 weeks off the processing time. The applicant would still need to meet all of the requirements to become licensed. We are, from a staff perspective, recommending a support of this bill because we think it falls in line with the board's goals that we've had for the last couple of years, and that is to reach out to underrepresented communities, to do what we can to help qualified applicants from those communities obtain a license. So that would be staff's thoughts on it, but we certainly welcome the committee's thoughts on this bill.
Thank you, Dave. And staff has recommended support position, which I do recommend also. And I would ask any of the committee members if they'd like to make comment or recommendations regarding AB 742. Okay, seeing no additional comments by the committee members, I will now turn to public comment. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding AB 742? Okay, hearing none. Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to comment on AB 742?
Seeing none at this time.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item 4, AB 1002. Gabriel, an analysis of this bill can be found in the supplemental meeting materials. AB 1002 is pending the Assembly Business and Professions Committee. This bill would authorize the Attorney General to file a civil action to suspend, revoke, or deny licensure of a contractor for failure to pay workers or failure to comply with a wage judgment or court order. I will turn the discussion over to DCA Board Counsel John Kinn. I think who's going to make comment on this.
Thank you, Chair Barton. Yes, I just wanted to explain the background, which was some wage violations made by a very large subcontractor down in Southern California. The Attorney General, as they are entitled to do, brought a civil action against the contractor for the wage violations. But CSLB was not aware of it immediately. So CSLB was fielding calls about a case that had not yet been brought to their attention. So this bill was motivated originally by a CSLB request to receive notice of any AG civil actions affecting licensure or any of its licensed contractors. And although I believe staff agrees with the intent of the bill, it's changed a little bit to also allow the suspension and what's in the statute now, permanent revocation, without including a lot of things that CSLB options they have now, including letters of admonishment, citations, probation, monitoring. So while agreeing with the intent, I believe staff's current recommendation is to continue to meet with the Attorney General's office so that the concerns about implementing this bill with CSLB could be worked out while still providing the Attorney General with the authority they're looking for to get some of the harmful construction activities out of the market. And I'm not sure how many questions I could answer, but I'm certainly open if anyone has any requests.
Thank you, John. And I believe staff has recommended a neutral position on it, probably pending your explanation of it that we're already doing that. But I would now like to open this agenda item for discussion by the committee members. Are there any comments or questions regarding AB 1002? Rodney.
Thank you. Yeah, I would also like to have this bill placed on the June agenda.
I agree. Thank you, Rodney. Registrar Vogt.
Yes, we'll put that on the agenda for the June 13th board meeting.
Thank you, sir. Any other committee member would like to discuss or speak on this item? All right, thank you. Seeing no additional comments by committee members, I will now turn to the public comment. Are there any public members in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding AB 1002?
There is one.
Yeah, thank you, Richard Marcus. I'm curious. I appreciate Mr. Kinn's description of the case. We watched the case as well. That I think we'll get into this. But I'm a little curious to know if CSLB staff or you know if the AG prosecuted in that case why they think that they need the additional statutory authority. And I think from the contractor's perspective, we would be concerned if there is a different standard for license suspension or revocation that is given to the Attorney General that differs from the Contractor State License Board. It seems to, I think from the contractor's perspective, that having two different standards for discipline against contractors by different state agencies. Some that might be more politically motivated than others is going to be a problem.
Yeah, if I could comment on that, thank you, Mr. Markuson. One thought we had is to work with the author to clarify the intent of this bill. We have, for many years, worked with local DAs on what we call Business Professions Code 17-200 and 500. These are the civil statutes that relate to unfair practice. And generally, when you're involved in that type of investigation, you're not seeking revocation of the license. It's more about getting civil penalties, in this case, getting workers the wages that they're owed. In the event that they don't, it's more of a civil judgment. What we will generally do is have a companion accusation. We use the administrative process to discipline and, if necessary, to revoke the contractor's license. And I think the question is well put. Why do they need additional authority to take this on when the AG has the authority to file an unfair business practice? I guess the question is, to what extent can CSLB be on the caption and part of the action? But what I was hoping for, what really asking the committee to do, is support staff reaching out to the author to further clarify the need and intention of this bill.
Thank you, Registrar Folk. I think that would be the direction if anyone, unless anyone objects. All right, thank you for that. Seeing none and no more in Sacramento. Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to comment on AB 1002?
Not seeing any. Oh wait, never mind. Andrea Montano just raised her hand, so I will be sending her a request to unmute.
Thank you.
Thank you. No comment at this time, but I do have a question. I'm wondering, is there, and maybe it's in the Business and Professional Code, where it talks about the levels of disciplinary action from suspension to revocation and timeframes. Is there a published document that indicates what that escalation procedure looks like?
Thank you. I guess I would ask John Kin Esquire, would you be able to comment or to produce that document?
Be happy to respond to anything in the chat that you have a request about, and we could provide that information. I think there were a number of questions you just asked, and I hate to give you wrong information at this time.
My question is specific to just a document that shows the civil action from a suspension to a revocation, if we have anything that shows that escalation process or criteria.
Not in the context of a civil action that I'm aware of.
We have administrative action information. The information you're requesting is located in several different places, and we can piece it together for you, and I'll work with you on that offline.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, is there anyone else on WebEx, Catherine?
Seeing none at this time.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to number 5, AB 1341 Hoover. An analysis of this bill can be found in the supplemental meeting materials. AB 1341 is pending in the Assembly Business and Professions Committee. This bill would provide that unlicensed practice in architecture, engineering, or land surveying is cause for disciplinary action by CSLB. For further comment on this bill, I'll turn it over to Dave Folk. Dave?
Yes, thank you, Chair Barton. Just a little update on this, and that Mike Kudinski and I had a meeting yesterday with the executive officers of the engineering board and the architects board. That would be Rick Moore and Laura Zuniga, to talk about this bill, to see how this would impact their programs, do they support it, and it was quite educational. What this bill would do is, if we have a CSLB licensed contractor that is found to be acting unlicensed as an architect or an engineer, or if they have a licensed engineer architect that's also licensed by CSLB and committing a violation of their Practice Act, they would refer that over to CSLB for action, for taking action on our license at CSLB. The question was, how often do they think this would occur? And the answer for both of them was about 20 times a year. So we could be potentially looking at 40 additional investigations. But if you compare that to the 20,000 we're already doing, it's not that significant. I think it could be helpful. I think in engaging with other regulatory bodies to combat the unlicensed underground economy is helps the public as a whole. And so looking at it from that perspective, we did have a neutral on this, but we're now wanting to know if the committee would be in support of this bill.
Thank you, David. We would do that at the June meeting, correct?
Well, yes, if you decide that this is of relevance to the committee, we'll include this as a bill for the board to take a formal vote on at the June 13th meeting.
Yeah, I think that's the direction, so I appreciate that. If you would, I would now like to open the agenda item up for discussion by the committee members. Are there any comments or questions regarding AB 1341 from committee members? And we'll bring that up on our June item. Seeing no additional comments by committee members, I will now turn to public comment. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding AB 1341?
Richard Marcus.
David, I assume from your conversation with Rick and Laura that as I understand the bill, is primarily A or B contractors that are performing some aspects of civil engineering or land surveying without the appropriate license in either of those professions as part of their construction services. And so it would seem that 20 number is potentially a little bit on the high side. I don't know how frequently that would happen where an A or B contractor doesn't have a licensed land surveyor or civil engineer. But I think coordination between, I doubt that it happens very often in architecture, but certainly between the engineers board and CSLB, I think it's worthy of taking further consideration in June. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. And they did think the 20 could be on the high side. They've not done a study of it, so we're comfortable with that.
Thank you, Registrar Folk. Thank you for that comment too. Moderator, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to comment on AB 1341?
Yes, Andrea Motano's hand is raised, so I'll be sending her a request to unmute.
Catherine, I might be a little fuzzy on this, and so if I am, I apologize in advance. But my notes on this were, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's kind of bridging that partnership with the architectural and engineering certification piece of it. And to some of my previous comments, I had mentioned about some of these kind of independent verification systems, IT collaboration systems. The architect could also play a critical role in, preventing fraud because of this third-party dynamic that they share with contractors. And so I don't know if recommending that amendment, and again, I'd have to take this back to the legislature also to ask some more questions, but potentially looking at a standardized, documentation requirement verification of project milestones, that kind of falls in line with some of their checks and balances, as well as a liability framework for certification related issues. So CSLB has a vantage point for those views into these other parties, and potentially establishing like a cross-disciplinary enforcement procedure between the architects board and CSLB. I don't know if that information may already be shared between agencies. I'm not sure, but that balancing approach would not only prevent unlicensed practice, but also harness, architectural expertise to prevent fraud before it occurs. And so I just kind of want to layer that factor in where that could be potentially an advantage for other benefits in the context of fraud. And so if it hasn't already been mentioned, I think this would be a great one to also put on the June agenda.
Hey, thank you. And I think we are. So Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx still who wish to comment on AB 1341?
Seeing no others at this time.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we'll go to item 6, SB 61 Cortese. An analysis of this bill can be found in the supplemental meeting materials. SB 61 passed on consent out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, passed Senate floor, and it is in second house. Mike, is this the case?
Thank you for asking. I don't think it's in second house yet. I was gonna I checked today. I don't think it is. I think it's in the Senate floor. Thank you for double checking. I appreciate it.
Okay, great, thank you. And this bill would limit the amount of a retention payment withheld from a payment for a private work of improvement for exceeding 5% of the payment or contract price. Staff recommended a support position. This bill does not present any additional workload requirements to CSLB and may provide enhanced subcontractor solvency. For further comment on this bill, I'll turn it over to Registrar Vogt.
Thank you, Chair Barton. This bill, it relates to our authority under Business Professions Code 7120 to address a contractor, a prime, or they call them direct contractor. If somebody has a direct contract with the property owner that's paid in full or paid for the work performed by the sub and doesn't pay the subcontractor timely, they withhold money. So they've been paid for the subcontractor's work, and then they are in the private sector withholding 10%. And what we discovered in looking at this bill is that in public works now it's 5%, private works is 10%. And that does pose a harm to subcontractors. Some of them are smaller contractors. They have a tough time surviving until they're able to collect on that 10%. And I know the director of prime contractors withhold it because they want to have that leverage if there's callbacks or additional repair work that needs to be done. But when we looked at it from a staff perspective, we thought, why is it 10% in private works and 5% in public works? Seems like it could be 5% for both. It might help to reduce some complaints that we receive here and just kind of level the playing field for private and public works. That was staff's perspective on this bill.
Yeah, thank you, Registrar Vogt. And then my discussion with Legislative Director May yesterday, I agreed with your surmising of this, that it should be on par with, it should be 5% would make it easier for public works and private works. So I would recommend support also, and we should bring this up at our June meeting. And I would like to open up for discussion by the committee members. Are there any comments or questions regarding SB 61 from committee members? Okay, hearing none. No comments
Miguel
by.
raised his hand.
Yes.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Just a comment that I might share, and that's not to say that this issue was not considered. But oftentimes on public works, there are bonds that protect the client. And so there's a secondary protection in the sense of a payment and performance bond that are attached to the contract that provide that additional protection to the public entity. And in the case of private work, it's very rare that there is a performance and payment to protect, to equal that same protection. And it just a thought that maybe that hasn't been considered as to why that there is a separation or a distinction between private and.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that expertise on that. So yeah, I think then we should bring this up in June. I thank you again for that, that knowledge that you presented. So any other committee members like to comment on SB 61? Okay, thank you. Seeing no additional comments by committee members, I will now turn to public comment. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding SB 61.
I do know, Richard Marcus, and I do know that there are amendments that I believe are pending on this one to address some of the opposition from developers and general contractors. I haven't seen the language yet, but I'm sure that Rebecca will see them when they go into print or before. I think it would be valuable for you to look at those before making your decision in June. But I'm sure they can get print by your June meeting.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take a look at the further discussion in the legislature during this bill.
Thank you very much. Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to comment on SB 61?
Seeing none at this time.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item 7, SB 342 Umberg. There's a brief summary of this bill in the supplemental materials. Staff were advised last week that this bill is being held in the Senate Business, Professions, and Economic Development Committee and is not moving in 2025. Barring any objections, let's move on to the next bill on this list, being it will not be brought up this year. Any objections? All right, thank you. We'll move on to item 8, SB 456 Ashby. An analysis of this bill can be found in the supplemental meeting materials. SB 456 is pending the Senate Appropriations Committee. This bill creates a narrow exemption from licensure for artists who paint murals. The bill defines a mural as a unique work of fine art that is protected by copyright, trademark, label, or patent that is drawn or painted by hand directly upon an interior or exterior wall or ceiling, fixture, or other apertures of a building or structure. For further comment on this bill, I'll turn it over to Mike Jametsky. Mike?
Thank you, Committee Chair Barton. Yeah, this bill is jointly sponsored by the California Arts Advocates and the League of California Cities. And just to let the committee members know, staff has been working, staff has experience in crafting exemptions from the contractor's law. So we've been working with the author staff and committee staff on just making sure the words and the language get parsed out. And really, I think the goal of some of the staff and the author staff are to really differentiate the work of what is fine arts for a mural and what is requiring of a license where you're applying products and materials to walls. And how do you write down in words what's the difference? That's been our involvement. So that's it. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mike. Thank you for that. And currently staff recommends neutral, but what I'm getting from your comments is we probably should look into this further and bring it up at the June meeting.
Yes, if you think this would be relevant for the full board to discuss, absolutely.
Yeah, without objection, I think so, because we've had the comment regarding this issue in the past. And if I recall, the body of the bill had a threshold of $1,000, so it kind of did something, but I think maybe staff should look more into this, and we should look in June.
Chair.
Without objections?
Chair, if I might. Could Mike Jametsky maybe add further clarity as to whether this artwork exemption is on existing substrates, or does the exemption not cover newly constructed substrates to put the art on?
It's a great question, Miguel, because staff talked about that with committee staff. We stuck in the word appurtenances. Appurtenances. And that word is an old word, and it's a property word, and it's in our license classifications for the C33. And my understanding is it just kind of covers land and like a tool shed on land or a separate garage or sidewalks or a tree or a fence. So it would be my understanding at this time that the mural would apply to an interior or exterior wall or ceiling, a fixture, or other appurtenances of a building or structure. So I think just, if you can imagine a plot of land and then the things on it, and you can extend it to sidewalks, brick walls, a wall, interior wall, exterior wall, interior ceiling, exterior ceiling, interior freeway. I think it covers the gamut, but that's just one person speaking.
Thank you, Mike. And the only reason I bring that up is we've had issues in our jurisdiction where artists were given exemptions for not necessarily murals, but for artwork, which then required extensive foundations to mount the artwork, which clearly was contract work that they were not licensed for or authorized to, but they were given this exemption without clarity as to what, with that exemption required. So I just want to make that point of order.
Another excellent point. This is limited expressly and clearly to a mural. And it's anybody who draws, paints, applies, executes, restores, or conserves a mural on a building. Painting or drawing. It does not include the installation of steel or other structural works.
Waterproofing.
Yeah, right. Oh, and it excludes painted wall signs because we have a license classification for that. So that's excluded. And it also has to be pursuant to an owner who can legally authorize the contract, which means it's not going to cover graffiti.
Thank you for that, Miguel, and thank you, Mike. I think this warrants further investigation, and we should bring it up at the June meeting. Are there any objections to that? All right, thank you. Any other comments or discussion from committee members in regard to SB 456? Or actually, yeah, 3456. All right, seeing none, I will now turn to public comment. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding SB 456?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to comment on SB 456?
Yes, and we also have a commenter from the prior item who commented after we had passed to this item. So I'll be calling on him first. That's Roy Porter, and then we'll go to the other comment.
Great, thank you.
Hi again. Hey, thank you for the opportunity. I had a skip in the presentation there. So I'm talking about Berg's Bill 342. And without going into a lot of detail, I'm available to talk to people from the board and the legislative committee. A couple comments that I have personal experience is that we need some more clarity and definition as to what is a duly licensed contractor. I've spent a lot of money in legal fees arguing with exchanges of letters and interrogatories as to what is a licensed contractor. I know it has a definition in 7125. But I think that if it's clarified in the bill, in the upcoming legislation, that it would reduce some of the legal rambling. And one example would be the requirement of workers' compensation insurance. My personal experience where there is a continuing debate as to what is an employee, and when we ask for information, they then claim that everything is a client-attorney privilege or it's a trade secret. The standards as a reference to like ABC or Borello should be included in here so that it's more clear. I'll give you one specific example. It says in 7031 that if you're unlicensed that you can't bring action. I have personal experience where an unlicensed contractor has filed a lien, a mechanical lien on my property. It held up payments, all kinds of stuff. I'll spare you all the details. But I think that if we clarify and define some of these things better, it will make the resolution go along faster. I'm available to help anybody out with my personal experience on this, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you very much. Catherine, are there any members on WebEx who wish to comment on SB 456?
Yes, Davi Rodriguez has raised his hand, so I'll be sending him a request to unmute.
Good morning again. First, I will be admitting that this legislation, I am the cause of it. I complained loudly all over the state about these cities and counties hiring unlicensed contractors to paint what they call murals. And they largely ignored me. And this is their attempt to find a very unjust bill, very unjust practice into law. No, what an artist is. They try and define it here, but it's very ambiguous. So much so that I don't think any judge is going to want to decide a case over this. They're probably just going to dismiss it if you go out and arrest somebody as a painter and they say, well, no, I'm an artist. It's so ambiguous, and they're coding it so that about something about a label or a copyright. Hey, anybody can copyright anything very, very easily. You can also just change the hue of the paint and put two tones in it and say that's artistry. Now, I don't see how any painter should not be given the same consideration. These people that artistry is involving contracts, of $40,000 sometimes, and they're also calling for all this prep work in there, the pressure washing and even adding architectural stuff into there so that it co-joins in the mural. Sacramento City just did one after I challenged them. They're sneaky now about it. They're hiding it from the public record. That's just the cities and counties we're talking about. Now, once this law gets passed, then everybody gets to do it. Doesn't matter if you work for a city or a county. And any painter, why would they get a contractor's license at this point? They could certainly just fall under this exemption. So there's this grand inequity that this thing is creating, an ambiguity. And I think it's going to create a nightmare for the board to try a new enforcement of painters after that point. They should just get licensed. I'm sorry, that's it.
No, that's good. Thank you for your perseverance and explanation. So I think this is something we should bring up because I looked at it as a benefit, but your description is basically not a benefit. So I think this is something we should bring up at our June meeting. Without objections, Registrar Pope?
Yeah, what we would like to do, I guess, from a staff perspective would be to maybe meet with Davey Rodriguez and also do a little more research into it, bring it back to the board on June 13th.
That would be great. Thank you. Are there any more comments, public comments on WebEx, Catherine?
Not at this time.
All right, thank you. And let's move on to our final bill, SB 517, the yellow. An analysis of this bill can be found in the supplemental meeting materials. SB 517 is pending the Senate Judiciary Committee. This bill requires every home improvement contract to include the name and contact information of the subcontractor. If the subcontractor performs more than 50% of the total estimated project costs, staff recommended a support if amended position. This bill provides greater transparency between the prime contractor and consumer and may reduce the number of mechanics lien placed on homeowners. Staff has recommended amendments to the author's office to clarify that the prime contractor is responsible for the subcontractor's work and include the subcontractor's license number and classification along with their name and contact information in the home improvement contract. For further comment on this bill, I'll turn it over to Dave Vogt. Registrar?
Thank you, Chair Barton. From an enforcement standpoint, or even more importantly, from a consumer protection standpoint, it's very important that you as a homeowner are contracting with somebody that's licensed and responsible for the work that's being performed. And what we see on occasion is where we have a prime contractor, I mean the contractor that has that direct contract with the property owner, that will tell the property owner, you don't like the work done by my sub, contact them directly. And we don't allow that, no. You as the prime contractor are responsible. The owner needs to advise the prime contractor to work that was done allegedly defective by the subcontractor. I'll explain why that's so important. Because when you have a contract with somebody and you're paying them directly, we need that evidence to support a financial injury. We don't investigate subcontractors. The only exception to that is where a prime contractor could show us they put the sub on proper written notice and the sub didn't perform and the prime had to repair or complete their work. We would entertain that complaint, but we can't have prime contractors telling homeowners, you knew a subcontractor was doing this work, you work directly with them to resolve it. No, that's why we would like to have, that's why we want the amendment to make it very clear that while it's helpful to know who the sub is, that there's a clear understanding that the prime contractor is 100% accountable for any work done by that prime contractor's subcontractors.
Thank you, Registrar Folk. If you'd work on that with staff and Legislative Director May, and prep our June meeting, if you would.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, sir. I'd like to open the agenda item up for discussion by committee members. Are there any comments or questions from committee members regarding SB 517?
Yes, Chair. Just for my clarity, Register Folk, was the recommendation to lower it from 50% to any subcontractor? Is that what the amendment is moving forward? Or what exactly are we changing in this specific SB 517?
Well, that's absolutely something you could recommend, but as far as the amendment, we just wanted a sentence in there that clarifies or confirms that the prime is responsible for the subcontractor's work. But if the 50%, Senator Nilo has been very supportive of the contractors for the construction industry. You may entertain another amendment, but 50%, pretty good threshold. You know, another issue that happens is we have liens placed on homes by subcontractors. So you as a property owner would benefit you to know if a sub's doing more than 50% of the work, because you could ensure that was paid for before you pay your prime for that portion.
No doubt. I think lessons from on the public works side is anything more than 1/2 of 1%, you must notify the client that they're working on the job. Not only does that prevent labor fraud, because they're responsible to submit payroll reports that they have employees on the job, but it also affords the client to know whose material is being delivered, who they don't get a mechanic sling from somebody they didn't know was working on the job outside of the prime contractor. So I certainly would, when the opportunity arises, to revisit the 50% because there's exposure to the public, quite frankly, at any percent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miguel. Registrar Folk, if you look into that, please. And we'll bring a June agenda. Any other comments from committee members? I think Mr. Kobos had.
Yeah. So what prior to adjourning, I just, if it's not out of order on item 4, AB 1002, Gabriel, just for clarification, I don't know if we moved that bill to the June agenda, and if not, I'm requesting it this time.
I didn't hear that last part. We heard you mentioned 1002, and then what was the last statement you made about it?
I wasn't sure if we moved that also to the June agenda, and if not, I'm requesting it this time.
We did.
Certainly will, yes.
No, we did.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Registrar Folk. Thank you, committee member co-hosts for that.
That's what I missed it, so.
All right, well, good. So now, any other committee members? Yes.
Thomas Reese. Would, on 517, subcontractors get changed out. Would this require informing the homeowner when that happens? And then, because we know that contractors get changed out frequently. So is there a noticing requirement in this bill as well?
Oh, that's a good point. Registrar Vogt, is there any way we could include that?
Well, we can absolutely propose that be added to the bill. I don't believe there's a requirement today, but we could clarify that.
Yeah.
That's right, Senator Nilo, if he would entertain an amendment to require that they update the subcontractor if they have a substitution.
Thank you, Thomas. Good point. All right, any other committee members would like to make comment or discuss? All right, great, thank you. Now I'd like to turn to public comment. Are there any members of the public in Sacramento who wish to address the committee regarding SB 517? All right, hearing none. Catherine, are there any members of the public on WebEx who wish to comment on SB 517?
Yes, we have two people. Yes, we have two. Actually, we have 3 people. One of them just dropped off. I'll request if he wants to speak first. Yes, there he is. So I'll send a request to Roy Porter to unmute, and then we have 2 other commenters after that.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So having had personal experience with this, I want to extend my invitation to CSLB and the legislative people working on this for comments. I believe that the percentage should be dropped to much less than 50%. I have personal experience where suddenly I get preliminary notice for materials for people I have no idea who they are, and they were satisfied, but I had no notice of who subcontractors were. We've subsequently found out in my particular situation that none of the subcontractors, or 5 of them, were licensed in the state of California, and they didn't have workers' compensation insurance. So what I'm suggesting is that there be full disclosure of all subcontractors, including their license number, and that they have adequate insurance and a way to contact them. Nobody likes surprises, and I think that would help to reduce a few, at least in my case. I want to support the change out notice because I had several subcontractors for electrical and plumbing change throughout the project, and the general told me it was at his discretion and he didn't need to tell me who he had working on the job. So I would be surprised to find new and different people working. So I think that giving this notice would help many people in many ways and prevent or reduce some of the antics that go on. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for that, Registrar Vogt. Is that something we could look into also prior to our June meeting?
Yes, we can absolutely follow up on that. We do have the contact information in the chat.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other comments from WebEx, Catherine?
Before we go to that, I think we may have lost the quorum. Diana Love has left the meeting, so I wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that before we proceeded.
Okay, let me know when you're ready. Thank you.
If she left, I think we have 5.
Yeah, she said that she needed to leave the meeting. I was telling her that we still needed the quorum, but then she left before I could tell her so.
I think we still have 5 out of 7.
Do we?
Okay, yes. We're okay.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, so thank you. All right,
Thank you.
for that, we'll go to the next comment then. And I will call upon Andrea Montano.
Thank you again, committee and Catherine. I promise this is probably my last comment of the day. I just want to plus register folks edifications on the making the prime contractor accountable and also some sub compliance there, as well as what Roy had mentioned about having full disclosure for the subcontractors that are being hired. We try to do our due diligence when we're looking up, craftsmanship and work, and it's really hard to do that if you really don't know what's happening behind the curtain. And so I would definitely agree with those points. And also going back to incorporating a framework for emergency response approach, this could strengthen kind of a three-way handshake also for subcontractors. I know this is really about enforcement and accountability. I agree that we need to look at less than 50% because a lot of these cases, they're, electrical engineers, they're plumbing contractors. There's different people coming in to do foundation work, do framing and, tape and texturing. And so it's really hard to say what is that 50% and is that adequate for the protection that you're trying to put in place. And also want to be reaching out to Senator Niello to add some provisions potentially to prevent misrepresentation about subcontractor performance, including false claims that subcontractors walked off the job so they can rehire a new contractor and also not pay that person. And we've seen that happen in multiple instances. Also tying in that rapid response protocol when subcontractors report non-payment, that may threaten a business's viability. And so that also has detrimental effects on the contractor. And then that's where these peekaboo mechanical liens are filed out of nowhere. And there's no even contact information for where they can find out more about that or even object to that, the validity of that. Establishing a financial hardship triage system, again, tying that component back in would specifically also help subcontractors who have employees and, still trying to keep the lights on. And then implementing some type of this bridge that that creates opportunity for severely impacted folks. Because we're seeing that there's less accountability at the general level, and then there's a lot of other procedural things that are happening between what the homeowner has to go through to complete the project, potentially working with planning departments, and there's some complexities there, as well as trying to figure out who's filing potential liens against their property, even though they paid the general contractor and those funds weren't dispersed properly. So I think strengthening this bill would enhance disclosure, having some contractual language that covers the protection for all of these parties, I think is critical. And those are some of the recommendations that I would like to take forward to Senator Danilo for this bill. Just some additional things there I'd like to consider as we look at this one in its totality. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comment. I know Registrar Pope will take that under advisement, and also Legislative Director May for this important bill. So, Catherine, are there any other members on WebEx who wish to comment on SB 517?
Yes, Beto has his hand raised. I'll be sending him a request to unmute.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
My comment comes back on enhancing this bill to incorporate bonding requirements. I know I kind of touched up earlier on another subject, but it kind of ties back into this when you have prime contractors that use either 50% or sometimes even greater than 50% of subcontracted work. And in addition to that, the rampant sales and demand of, particularly right now in the ADU market, but you do have a lot of prime contractors that engage in strictly selling projects and hiring only predominantly subcontractors to perform most of the work. The bonding requirement right now at $25,000 does absolutely nothing to create a safeguard for either homeowners or subcontractors. Using myself an example, in multiple occasions, the $12,000 before, now $25,000 bond spurred out into multi-million-dollar claims. The offer that was given to the subcontractors was, in my case, it was like $47, $250,000 in claims. So when you have prime contractors specifically engaging in the practice of hiring subs to do all of the work, it creates a huge liability for subcontractors to carry on the entire burden in the event that the prime goes down. So this is something that I think needs to be enhanced, needs to be looked at by CSLB to create protection, not only just for the subcontractors. We understand our risk factors when we engage in the business, but homeowners themselves fall victim to this as well when they've paid thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands in some cases, to primes, and the prime goes out of business, and they're completely without a
30
project and
seconds.
without a money. So I think this is something that would be, in my opinion, needs to be looked at and fixed.
Yeah, thank you so much for that comment. Catherine, are there any other general public on WebEx wish to comment regarding SB 517?
Think no more at this time.
All right, thank you. Well, now what you've all been waiting for, item D, adjournment. Moving on to adjournment, I'd like to thank the legislative committees, staff, and the public for participating in today's meeting. It was all great discussion. Today's discussion will help formulate staff recommendations to the full board at the June quarterly meeting. And before I ask for a motion to adjourn again, thank Registrar Fogue, all his competent staff up there in Sacramento. They do such a great job for the board, so I appreciate that. And I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We move seconded. Without objection, the meeting stands adjourned at 12:21. Thank you, everyone, the general public. Thank you all for your time here on these important subjects.
Yeah.
You did great.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well.
We're adjourned.